It's time for the unofficial 40. Soonerscoop.com's very official recruiting podcast featuring Soonerscoop.com recruiting publisher Josh McCuistion. Get your recruiting fix from the leader in Sooner recruiting. It's the unofficial 40 with your hosts, Soonerscoop.com publishers Gary Murdoch and Josh McCuistion. Eddie Radicevich, Soonerscoop.com.
All right, welcome back. It is time for another edition of the unofficial 40. We welcome back in the whole crew, and woohoo! It's actually, we have football going on. We have things to talk about. It's a Thursday here, so we're actually kind of midweek podcasting for the first time in a while, and had a chance to go out to practice this week, and we got basketball stuff going on all over the place right now. Just Joe DuVall is here. He's going to tell us a little bit about that. Eddie Radicevich has been out shooting practices this week for the first time in a while. Fired up putting the social media stuff up, and Josh McCuistion, we've got some recruiting stuff getting ready to gear up. There's a lot of players coming in while the Sooners are practicing. We've got new facilities that are getting ready to take shape at the end of April. We've talked to Baker Mayfield, the offense already this week. We're going to talk to the defense today. But welcome in, fellas. Josh, how you doing today?
I'm great, guys. Just kind of anxious to listen for once. I feel like I am secondary to the show now.
See, you're just pandering now because all the reviews on iTunes are like, we want more Josh. It's like passive aggressive.
I have yet to read these. I need to look at these. My ego could use the boost.
We don't let Josh talk. Those kind of things. Eddie's fraternity, I almost said sorority. His fraternity is sorority. Apparently...
Hello?
Eddie, we can hear you. Can you hear yourself?
Yeah, I think so. It was just really loud, or light.
Hold on.
There we go. That's a lot better.
I had it turned down for radio duties. I think I was doing some Thunder pregame the other day. No, your fraternity apparently drove a man to murder himself.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I was talking to some of my fraternity brothers this morning. I guess it's a good sign though when spring rush is going on and you have kids that want to be in the fraternity so bad that they kill themselves when they don't.
He was a junior. I don't think he was going through rush.
Well, supposedly he did, and he got blacked by Fiji.
Is that really what happened?
Yeah, supposedly. That's the rumor on the street.
Okay, so this guy drove through the fence into the backyard. Was it the backyard?
Yeah, into where the basketball court is.
It was right off of Chautauqua?
Yeah.
And fired a couple of shots at the house?
Yeah, and I guess some guys, obviously heard the commotion, came outside, and he tried to shoot them, and he had run out of bullets because he had already shot up the house.
And he threw a hatchet at somebody.
Yeah, he threw a hatchet.
They said that he was at the Walmart prior to that, hatcheting up shrubbery or something.
So strange.
So
I mean, just
disturbed individual.
Very much. Looking at his Twitter postings, he seemed.
You've looked at his Twitter postings?
Well, I just saw that somebody said I thought this was him, so I looked at his Twitter, and a very affected, mentally ill individual it looked like.
Ugh. It's a bad deal. And then he shot himself.
Yeah, obviously it wasn't Fiji material.
Okay, no, you're being too evil. The man just died.
Well, his family needs to pay for the fence too, because we can't.
How does that work?
I don't know. That's what I want to know.
Is that a city-owned fence?
No, we own the
or university-owned fence.
We own the entire lot where the house is actually built.
I think Clay Bennett can afford a small section of a fence.
Yeah, or Lee Allen Smith, one of the two.
Get some rich boys.
Definitely not coming from the Radicevich pocket, I'll tell you that.
Well, I'm glad you can show some compassion, Eddie.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, let's first start out with we'll get into some spring football, but there's all kinds of basketball stuff floating around. There's been a big release by the University of Washington today that's making news.
Yeah.
Joe?
Washington released Michael Porter Jr., the number one player in the country for 2017. We talked about in the last week's podcast that he was committed to go there, play for his dad, who was an assistant coach there. Lorenzo Romar, the head coach there, was his godfather. But they had a terrible season. Romar gets
9-22, I think they were.
Yeah, and awful. They're going to have the top pick in the draft, which is just crazy to think that you can do that. And they fired Romar. His dad's probably going to lose his job. So Porter, the speculation was that he would get out of his national letter of intent that he signed last November in the early signing period. That was finally granted today, which means that the Oklahoma coaches can now talk to Michael Porter Jr. directly. Before today, it had just been Trae Young kind of dealing with him and sending out those vibes, but now the coaches can do it directly. There's been a lot of speculation that Michael Porter Sr. has been offered a job at Missouri, and that's almost going to be a foregone conclusion that he takes it.
But he hasn't taken it yet.
He has not taken it yet, and that delay is a story within itself, because that seemed to be so inevitable. And the fact that it hasn't happened yet, and you see multiple reports come out that say, okay, well, this hasn't happened yet. That if they're reporting that for a reason, they're reporting that because there's something to the delay. There's something that they're kind of waiting on. Now, that may be because Michael Porter Jr. wants to go through this process longer. He doesn't want to be affected by his dad. It may be because his dad wants to see what other jobs kind of come open, what's out there, see if any other interest comes. And it may be a combination of both. But in the meantime, Oklahoma is going to make their pitch. They're going to try to sell Michael Porter Jr. on teaming up with Trae Young, who he was an AAU teammate with. But I don't believe that they'll bring on Michael Porter Sr. from everything I've been hearing lately. I don't think that's going to happen.
And just a case where there's really not an opportunity. They're full up on staff, right?
Yeah, I mean, they have their 3 assistant coaching positions filled, Chris Crutchfield, Carlin Hartman, and Kevin Kruger.
They just hired Kevin Kruger.
Right, so they would have to essentially find a job for another guy, and that's just not the way they operate. Everybody I'm talking to just says that's not going to happen. That's not the way Kruger operates. There were some rumors out there that, and I do believe that Kruger contacted Porter Sr., and some people speculated that might mean he might find a role for him in the program, but it's looking like that was just to talk about Michael Porter Jr., and that there's going to be no role for Michael Porter Sr. at OU. If Michael Porter Jr. comes to Oklahoma, from my reporting, it's going to have to be because he wants to team up with Trae, and they're going to have to convince him to separate from Dad.
And he's leaving the door open a little bit. I know I saw the USA Today high school. I can't remember the guy's name, but apparently he's pretty tight. He's been pretty tight with the Porter family. I think he's pretty tight with the Young family too.
Yeah, he did the round table with the Young family, I believe, before his commitment.
That's right. He was the one that they embedded, right?
Yeah, and they did their whole kind of round table
Jason
discussion.
Jordan, I think is his name.
Yeah, and he's got great sources, and he had a couple quotes from Michael himself that said that he's going to consider Oklahoma. He loves the idea of playing with Trae Young, which is kind of what we understood. That's why OU's in this picture, is because of his relationship with Trae Young. And I'll tell you, OU doesn't really, they're not confident by any means in their chances, and I don't even think they really expect much to come of this, but they know they have a chance, and so they're going to pursue it to all ends. And their main selling point is, look, I know you want to play with your dad, and I know that your brother could go with you to Missouri and stuff, but if you come here, you could play with Trae Young, and you could play with Cameron McGusty, and we have a better foundation than what Missouri has over there. You have to deal with a new coach coming in, a new system. You come here, we have a foundation, we have Trae Young. You just see what happens after that. Maybe you convince him, but I wouldn't get my hopes up if I were OU fans. Just be excited to be in the running, I would say.
Well, it's interesting. The Jason Jordan stuff. I mean, I think Porter several times has said, look, just because my dad takes a Missouri job doesn't mean that I'm going to go there. But he also is sure to say, but I'd love to play for my dad. So, yeah, you have to think if he gets that Missouri job that there's just no way that OU's going to get him.
He's going to go spend 6 months at a whatever college he goes to. So I don't really, is it that much to go 6 months and spend without your dad somewhere else? At least go to a school that's going to be competitive. Seriously.
That's what OU's going to tell him. That's OU's recruiting point. Look, you can say that you love the idea of going to Washington, playing for your dad and for your godfather and for all that to come together. But since that opportunity blew up,
maybe it was meant to be.
Don't force it. Just come play with Trae. Look at this opportunity. You're only going to be playing for 1 year anyway. OU's kind of, you don't know how long Trae Young's going to be in Norman. I've said this on the board before. OU's going to maximize all of the Trae Young years. They don't know how many years they have him on campus, so they're going to go all out in all of them. They don't see next year as a rebuilding year. They see every year they have him as a year to compete for championships. So they're going to sell Michael Porter on that. And if they get Porter, to join Trae Young. I mean, all of a sudden Oklahoma's in the national conversation, let alone trying to get back in the Big 12 conversation.
Nobody thought that Lon Kruger was going to be bringing in one and dones when he took this job.
No. Well, and he still hasn't yet.
Didn't work out so well for Jeff Capel.
No, it just.
But
Oklahoma's not a school that.
He recruited a couple of morons.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that's the difference with people who like to bring up, Capel's record when he got fired compared to what Kruger just did. And when Capel was having those types of records, Oklahoma was also amidst NCAA scandal. Kruger that's not going to happen. I mean, you look no further than this Porter Jr. Example. He's not going to hire Michael Porter Sr. just even for the idea of impropriety or the idea that they're not doing things the right way. So Kruger's running his program a way that OU fans can respect in a college basketball world that's very, very dirty. And for him to land a guy like Trae Young, I mean, most of that's fortuitous. He's in your backyard and a 5-star guy, and he was a ball boy while Blake Griffin was playing, but you still have to pull through and land him. You still have to actually get it done. And I would tell you, most people didn't believe that was going to happen, even up to a month before Trae Young committed. No one thought that Kruger could pull that off.
Some didn't think it was going to happen 24 hours before it happened.
You want to hear something funny that I heard today? Rayford Young has reached out to OSU and told them that they have a chance of signing his son if they would hire James Dickey. He played for him at Tech.
I wonder what Trae thinks about that.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, has Rayford Young been able to control anything that Trae has done to this point? He obviously didn't want him to go to OU.
Rayford Young's been inspired by LeVar Ball.
You think maybe he's just trying to see if he can get some attention too?
Yeah, get a job out of it, possibly.
All right, that's some good stuff.
The Oklahoma State basketball job is the only job in the country that you don't have to have any experience for and just have love for the university. Is there any other
job? For Mike Gundy.
Yeah, but he's a good coach.
Yeah.
I mean,
and he was coaching before he became.
Yeah, I was say Mike Gundy'd been coach. I mean, he knew the
offensive coordinator at Maryland and Baylor.
Yeah. I just think it's funny that that's the only job in America right now that you don't have to have any type of prerequisite.
You have to. I mean,
apparently not.
We don't know how serious. I mean, I can't see Mike Holder and Doug Gottlieb coexisting.
I would be shocked if they don't hire Gottlieb. And that's literally no inside sources.
I don't think that they will.
That'd be interesting. That will piss off a lot of people in Stillwater and just Oklahoma State fans in general, I guess you could say. I mean, my roommate went to OSU. He's not.
It does. I mean, it doesn't work with assistants. I mean, what was the big argument we had this week about Dusty Dvorak, admitting that he put his name in the ring or his hat in the ring for the defensive line job? Not once, but twice.
Yeah.
He did it. He did it before they hired Dyron Reynolds, which I didn't know. He told me this week. And then he also did it before they hired Calvin Thibodeau. And by the way, Dusty did have a message for everyone on the message boards about this. He said that they completely made the right hire by hiring Calvin Thibodeau, and that he's a much better coach and a much better person for that job than he would have ever been. So any of you that are still harboring this, they made a mistake because they didn't hire Dusty, he says they didn't, that they made the exact right hire.
Do you think that's going to convince people? Because people aren't going to buy that. Dusty wouldn't put his name in the hat in the ring if he didn't think he was the best man for the job.
Great. I hope it convinces people, because I just want people to know that in order to have those kind of conversations, I also have to deal with his poop pictures.
You guys deal. It's always fun when I get to talk with you guys because you come at it from such a different angle than what is my primary focus. When you guys, and I know there's some limitation on how much you can be around them, but when you guys are around Calvin, where do you see him as a position coach? I mean, how, I guess, what is your perspective on him?
One, that he loves Oklahoma. Two, that he's very serious about being great as a coach, about developing kids, about recruiting kids. It's really nothing more than that. Just when you talk to him, you can tell how much it means to him for his position to be successful and for Oklahoma to be successful and for him to continue building on a tradition that he was part of as a player.
I think serious is a good word. He seems like a determined guy.
He's not screwing around and laughing and grab assing out at practice. I mean, he is. Every time I see him and we have a chance to watch a practice, he is intensity turned up to 100.
That's what I get when I talk to recruits and when I talk to sources just about and people were so upset about the D-line class last year. From the impression I get, I don't think there was anyone more frustrated than Calvin Thibodeau with the way that class, just the way things broke. There were so many things that seemed right on the verge of going right for Oklahoma and just didn't go that way. And I don't think it's even a perspective of, well, this makes me look bad or something. I think, like you said, Kerry, he cares so much about it. Like
he felt like I'd heard like
he felt like he let down the school.
Yeah, let down the school, let down the fans, let down the program.
Yeah, that was the word I had gotten, was that there was some, am I not doing my part here? And like I said, I think this class is going to end up really solid, and this 2018 group is going to be a good group. And I think people will start to understand that first year recruiting is just really hard unless you get some really fortuitous, breaks. And I think when you look at everybody can get excited about Lincoln Riley, Austin Kendall kind of fell in his lap. I mean, a guy from North Carolina, a high-level recruit. Tennessee was kind of walking away from him. I mean, that was a fortunate break for him. In a lot of years, he'd had to take a 3-star guy that not everybody was excited about.
Yeah, unless he had a Gerald McCoy sitting in state,
exactly,
it was going to be tough.
Yep. And, I mean, we talked about it last year after one podcast after another. It was a horrible year for defensive linemen in Texas, like legendarily bad.
But that's a trend, kind of, right, Josh? That's not something that you can count on to bounce back, the style of football they're playing down there. Am I wrong?
No, you're. This is something I've ranted on for a long time, and I know you're familiar with it, Joe. When I think the reliance and the importance of 7-on-7 in Texas has become such a big deal that it has hurt line play. Now, offensive linemen, I think you can kind of – like you can turn a tight end into an offensive tackle. I mean, we all saw Lane Johnson. I mean, you can go through 100 stories where you kind of converted a guy. To me, defensive linemen, like you kind of have that mindset or you don't. I don't think there is a I don't think you grow into a defensive lineman. When I meet somebody and there'll be a talk of, well, he could play tackle or he could play defensive end. No, man, he's an offensive tackle. Like they're just wired a little different. And to me, when you look at all the passing in Texas and just how much it has minimalized the use of defensive linemen, I think it has. It's become a trend where you're just not seeing those elite defensive linemen guys up front.
And you mentioned last year's class, and you look at even 2018. It looks to me like the state of Oklahoma itself is becoming more of a resource for OU to rely upon for linemen than in years past. I mean, last year they go and get Tyrese Lott, they get Isaiah Thomas, and this year you got Jordan Kelly, you got Jalen Redmond. It looks like in-state almost looks to be as big of a resource for them as Texas is now.
Well, yeah, I mean, and then you throw in Ron Tatum, who's a guy they're really high on. So yeah, there is a lot to be said for this kind of crazy boom in linemen in Oklahoma. I mean, and you flip to the offensive side of the ball, Bray Walker, Bryce Bray, Hunter Anthony's committed to Oklahoma State. I mean, there is a lot of good line play on both sides of the ball in the last couple of years, and I don't think it's something you can count on, but obviously it's a big bonus for Oklahoma as they try to get with the exception of quarterback, probably the two most important position groups on the field, try to get those lined out.
Let me ask you, this kind of came out yesterday, this talking about recruiting, territories, all that stuff, getting your feet wet. What are we to think of this mega camp at the University of Memphis now? Is this like OU maybe doing somebody a favor and they're going to send a coach or something there? Maybe a GA or something? I mean, or is this something that could be fruitful?
And go out there and Tyler Tettleton's the only guy that shows up.
Even so, though, how bad is that? I mean, Tyler gets to go out, do a little work. I don't know. I don't know how that works. I'd have to look at, what if his abilities at that particular camp would be any different than that of, an OU camp. I don't know how those lines get drawn, and I think probably the NCAA doesn't either with how much this is all evolving in real time. But, yeah, to me,
my God, Auburn, OU, Kansas, Arkansas,
Yep.
Missouri. I mean, those are the big schools. Utah. I mean, it's just – and we've seen, when we go out to the satellite camps, we see a lot of, schools that are there and their coaches are there, and you can tell that they really haven't – they really don't have any guys there, and they're just there kind of working to see if they can find anything. But I got to think that if you put all these schools there – you're going to get some kids to show up.
And in Memphis, I mean, that's one of those areas that almost every year there is some guy that nobody knew about, and about late October, some kid from Memphis suddenly gets 15 offers. And it's not that by rule, but I mean, you guys know what I'm saying. There is in Memphis and sometimes just in the South, there are guys that for whatever reason just kind of fly unnoticed. I think a great example is a guy OU brought in a few weeks ago, the Kendarius Taylor kid. I was talking to people 3 days before he came to Oklahoma's junior day, and they didn't know what class he was in. And I go and turn on the kid's tape. I'm like, that's a Rivals 250 kid, and we don't know what class he's in. It's just crazy because there's so much talent. There's so many guys that some guys are just going to fall through the cracks. So I think this could be really good for Oklahoma. Based on where it is and the kind of guys that Oklahoma usually recruits from that region, I would have Calvin Thibodeau there, and I would have Kerry Cooks there for sure. Now, if you want to send some other guys, cool, that's great. But I guarantee you there are going to be a few good defensive linemen there that are worth a look, and there are going to be DBs coming out your ears that maybe – Alabama's already taken a guy they like better, or Tennessee's already in on another guy, and you can slide in and steal a guy that maybe you wouldn't have known about otherwise.
Okay, so maybe something big coming up this weekend. The Under Armour camp going on down in Dallas. Tulsa Union's Jordan Kelly going to be down there. He's got a top 3 now. What are we thinking here?
Well, yeah, for those that missed it, Tulsa Union defensive tackle Jordan Kelly announced last night that he's down to a final 3 of Oklahoma State, TCU, and Oklahoma. I think a lot of times people assume that because 2 guys play together, they're good buddies and they want to keep playing together. In the case of Patrick Fields and Jordan Kelly, it's absolutely true. Those guys are good friends.
And Patrick Fields is working him hard on Twitter, I know.
Absolutely. I think Eddie posted it on the board yesterday. Pat kind of would you even call that a guilt trip? That was almost a guilt trip. You guys, we won this title together at Union. Don't you want to do this again in Norman? I mean, that's what it felt like to me. And I think, if I was going to jockey it, I'd say 90% OU, 5% for the others. And I feel like that's just me being my hesitant self and making sure that I can say, hey, I said there was a possibility if something goes really wrong, but I'll be stunned if it's not Oklahoma.
Seems to me that Union group is pretty close-knit, and that even this in-state group in general, going back to 2017, you could probably go start it off with Justin Broyles. They really kind of like each other. They like the fact that they're all from Oklahoma, and they take pride in joining up together. Though it makes me think of, I don't know, maybe I'm crazy. Some of those earlier 2000 teams had a lot of Oklahoma guys on there, and you can kind of I don't know, maybe that kind of enthusiasm is something that it needs to bubble up from something in state. Is there something to that, Josh, that you got building your core around guys that are really excited to be there rather than, because someone like Cameron Rising was great to land early, but he's visiting Texas, and it's tougher to get those guys to really be your ringleader. Am I crazy?
No, you're not, and I think that's something that a lot of times, and I've gone over that 2000 roster before. People always have this impression that Oklahoma is built entirely on Texas high school football, and it's just not true. Don't get me wrong, it's a huge piece of the puzzle, but there is so much Oklahoma talent on a lot of the championship teams you see. I mean, you go that 2000 team, Rocky Kalmus, you go down the list. Antonio Perkins was part of that group. He wasn't playing a lot, but just you go down the list, and there's a lot of great players from Oklahoma. Teddy Lehman played a role late in that year. So, there are a lot of in-state guys, and I think it does. It's something special to them, and I think part of it is those guys know what the perception of them is nationally. They're not as good as Texas guys. That they know that's what people think, and I think it creates just kind of this drive. And you see these guys that, like Justin Broyles, if he thought, running through a brick wall at 9 a.m. every day was going to get him to the NFL in 3 years, Justin Broyles would build the brick wall and then run through it again. That's just that's how that kid is wired, and that's how you get with a lot of these kids. They are just so motivated to prove people wrong, and obviously when that's your goal, it works out well for Oklahoma.
I threw the stink bomb out there of Cameron Rising. Can you go into that a little more of what the situation is there? And I know Lincoln Riley had talked about on signing day how he wanted his quarterbacks to know when they committed early that they were committed, and that was a different thing for quarterbacks. But that kind of doesn't look like how it's going to go with Cameron Rising.
It does seem I'm very interested to know where those conversations are at. And I've talked to Cameron, and I don't know if he's going to give me the real dish on, how OU feels about it. But the people I've talked to, I don't get the feeling there's a ton of concern. Now, they know, stuff happens. This is crazy world. But really, there's nothing on his table right now that wasn't there when he made his initial decision. He could have gone to Oregon back then. He could have gone to Arizona State with his brother, and he still chose Oklahoma. I think the thing that scares OU is the good to great possibility that Lincoln Riley will not be his offensive coordinator. If Lincoln Riley gets a great job offer, then, the possibility that he moves on. But as I've said over and over again, I just don't see how that works, because that's going to happen in December. By December, Texas is going to need to know what Cameron Rising's doing. They can't put all their eggs in that basket and then have to go take some kid from nowhere South Texas and hope he can be their guy. They need a home run at quarterback in this first group, and they hope that's Cam Rising. But I just don't see that. I know there's a relationship with his dad, and that's great and all. But when I talk to Cam, he has such reverence for Lincoln Riley that I just don't see a relationship winning out over that until something changes. And at that point, again, I just don't see that being a fit.
I need to check into, and it's going to be interesting, the spring game, when it's held and what the visitors are like. I know we've had discussions. You're pretty sure Cam Rising will come in for that, right?
Yeah, that is what he's told me. Is he expects to be there.
I really want to kind of dig in and find out from some people, like, they're going to move in at the end of April to the new facilities. I would imagine by April 8th, they're going to be able to walk them through and show them something that's really, really impressive.
On Monday, Stoops said end of April.
Well, that's what I said.
Oh.
They're going to move in at the end of April.
I got
on April 8th, it should be pretty close to. They're going to have all kinds of crap going on, and it's going to be last minute.
Well, they took people around on the junior day inside. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would think, just having what they're going to have finished. And I think you said what they're working on the practice field right now, you could tell.
Well, they have everything cleared out now. I think it's more
those
about
trailers and everything are gone.
Yeah, it's more about just the landscaping and that kind of stuff.
I need to go up on top
inside.
of the parking garage and check it out. But I would think that it's going to really knock some people's socks off with what they're going to see, especially a guy like Cameron Rising. When's the last time Cameron Rising has been in Norman? Has he ever been in Norman?
Oh, yeah. He came in, let's see. I'm trying to remember if he was there for a game or not. I don't know that he made it in during the season, but he definitely came in last summer, and that was kind of that's what led to his eventual commitment, is how well the visit went. So he's been once. He's going to, obviously, like I said, he's coming back this spring. I'm sure regardless of what plays out in the future, he'll take an official visit. So there'll be multiple trips. But, like I said, I understand why people, get concerned when these kids are taking visits, but from my just conversations with people, I get a feeling this is a lot of Dad just wants me to look around and I'm going to take some trips. And I realize that scares everybody because of what happened in January, but I just don't get that same feeling. Like when I was talking to people behind the scenes, it was a lot of, well, I think Phillips has more interest than he's letting on. With Rising, I don't get that feeling. I get the feeling that Dad wants to take some trips, wants to make sure he's good with everything, but they are telling OU, we're in, this is fine, we just want to take some trips.
If you're a kid, if you're a fan and you don't think that these kids are going to not ever take trips, you are absolutely fooling yourself. I don't understand why people are so surprised by this kind of stuff, and they continually get surprised by it. It actually kind of pisses me off. It's like just thinking about it and thinking about people like just saying, "Oh, I can't believe this. I can't believe he's taking a trip to Tempe." Like, wake up! All right, I'm done.
It's a good thing I have very nice limiters on our microphones.
We're doing okay.
To bring a little more levity to Eddie's point, this is where we're at in recruiting, man. This is this era, and people will say, well, I don't even worry about commitments then. You should. If a kid commits, you are his top school. You are his option. That's where he is at that point in time. That's a good thing. I don't care if you hang on to him, if you lose him, that's a sign that you're moving in the right direction. OU may not sign either of Theo Weiss or R.J. Henderson. Neither would surprise me if they went somewhere else. It's so early, stuff will change. We all know that. But the fact that to me, it's a statement on where Oklahoma is that they wanted to be part of it so early and try to see what they could build.
And you know what? If you go out and you beat Ohio State in Columbus in game number 2, and you're still holding on to these guys, you're going to be holding on to them that much tighter.
And
Absolutely.
I love the dating analogy too. I mean, if someone's your girlfriend, you feel good about that. But that doesn't mean that they won't go find somebody else and cheat on you or get with some other guy.
Man, you've been hurt, haven't you?
Oh boy, my whole life, Carrie. But if that doesn't mean they're not going to go out and talk to somebody else or cheat on you. But if they're your girlfriend, you should feel pretty good about it. Now you'll feel better when you're married and it's a contract and you've signed everything. But that doesn't mean you still weren't feeling good when they were your girlfriend. And that doesn't mean Jacob Phillips won't, have a night in Baton Rouge and get a little crazy and then you lose that commitment. But what are you going to do? I mean, you'd rather take that relationship over not.
You're also doing it wrong if you're not hoping that he doesn't tear his ACL in the first 2 weeks.
God.
I just don't even know what to say.
About one of the nicest kids I've ever come across. This is what Eddie throws out there. Jeez. Eddie,
Shock jock.
What's amazing is we're having this discussion about a kid that's going to sign next year, yet did you just feel dirty having to post that a 2020 running back was coming in to visit this weekend?
That kid
I
is
feel
badass.
dirty. You know why I feel dirty? Because that will be my 20 anniversary. So that class, I'm kind of like, oh, God. This current group is the first group that there is a good possibility that they were not born when I walked across the stage and graduated high school, and that's scary.
What year did you graduate high school?
I was 2000. I was the millennium.
What was the first year you called a recruit?
January. It would have been like July of 2001. I had worked a summer job for my aunt and uncle in Dallas, and I've gone through this story on the board before. Was having trouble with the board. Contacted Krabby back when Krabby ran the board. The board was still Ask Krabby at that point in time, and he was like, "Oh, you're a journalism student, huh? Yeah, man, I am." And he was like, "Well, would you want to make some calls for me?"
Slave
and
labor.
I've been a recruiting nerd since I was like 14, so I couldn't have been. I've told this story before. Meeting Bobby Burton was a big deal in my life. Like that was a huge, weirdly important thing.
That is.
I know.
It's weird.
I know.
But yeah, 2020 kid.
I watched a little bit of I think you can go to jail for that. Dallas I forgot who it was now. I'm trying to think. But they did like a season-long episode thing with Alito. And I ended up watching it was like a documentary type thing. And I ended up watching the championship game. And he was badass. That running back is.
By the way,
Jace McClellan.
I don't know why that sparked this in my head, but whatever happened, there was some fire over by the Cowboys' new practice facility in Frisco.
No, that was in Tech. That was in Lubbock.
It was?
Yeah, that was
at their practice facility.
Yeah, because they're expanding on their, I guess it would be south of the stadium.
Uh-huh.
You know, where the bubble used to be.
Right. Yeah, I remember that.
They're like putting in a whole brand new performance center and stuff, and it actually caught fire. There was actually some pretty cool videos on Twitter yesterday. Not cool videos, but
well, for you.
Well, no, I have a affinity for, I think, Lubbock, so it wasn't very cool, but it was kind of out of control.
F.U. Baker.
Yeah,
you respect that?
Very much so. More so than people that, I don't know, throw like turkey legs at people. At least throw an F-bomb at them.
You mean like in Stillwater?
Eddie,
yeah.
On Twitter, and I've seen your interactions, do you like the people that like you or hate you more?
I like the people that hate me more.
Yeah, I had that feeling. I thought that was where that was going to go.
You've been raging a little bit on Twitter even since the show started.
Well, Skip Bayless is just a F-word loser. I hate him with everything, with all my heart. You think I have hate for Kevin Durant? Times that by 10, multiply it by 20. That's my hate for Skip Bayless. If I woke up tomorrow and Skip Bayless wasn't on this earth, it'd be a good day.
And you're also going after the Rutgers fans again.
Well, that was over the top for Rutgers. Even Rutgers fans know that they're losers, so they handled it pretty well, though.
All right, so spring football. I mean, Josh, anything else? I mean, anything new developing? I mean, as far as visits or anything that you've heard popping up about spring game visits?
No, I mean, I'm gonna have kind of a preliminary list tomorrow in the scoop of guys that we're kind of, and it's not really that I've run down a lot of people, but just over the last week we've seen a lot of people saying, "Oh, I'm going to be there April 8th. I'm going to be there." One guy that is coming in this weekend is Daniel Carson, the defensive lineman from Kansas that was offered at OU's first junior day. He's coming back. It's his first trip since he was offered. I guess since the last time he was here, I guess you'd say. I don't really know how that works. But yeah, he's coming back down. Obviously, we talked about last week, TJ Pledger, the Rivals 100 running back. I'm expecting him to arrive tomorrow. So on Friday, for those who are listening at various times through the weekend. I think he'll be in town on Friday, be there Saturday. I still think Oklahoma's going to get good news. So between him and Jordan Kelly, it should be a pretty good weekend for Oklahoma fans.
I don't think it could be any better situation, Josh, if you could get another in-state commit, as Joe was talking about with nailing down, your in-state, home state guys, and then, getting a national guy. That'd be a perfect weekend, I guess you could say.
Well, and absolutely. I mean, and you're talking about also getting a guy at running back, where obviously you always want to sign an elite talent, and getting a big body up front, which is always hard to come by.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, off topic. Sam Ponder, how about that? Leaving college football.
It's crazy. And we were talking about Kaylee Hartung.
She was going to CNN.
I completely forgot about that, but I remembered it as soon as
they need to get her back.
She got over here. And it's kind of weird too, because it's like she's going to work for actually like CNN. She's not going to work for
the sports
for like Turner.
Yeah.
I thought maybe that was the first thing, is that they were going to sign her up.
She's not the woman that you thought she was.
No, she's every bit the woman that I thought she was. She just has higher goals than covering sports, I guess.
I tell you what, she was doing the Sugar Bowl. Oh, she walked right next to me, and she's every bit as good in person, if not better.
Yeah, she's
a beautiful woman.
She's the type of girl you need to smell.
Did you smell her?
No.
That is
super
the literal
creepy.
first time I've heard that sentence. That is amazing.
She's the type of girl you need to smell.
Some would say you would drink her bathwater.
You would.
Maybe.
Absolutely.
She's really hot.
She's the type of girl.
Look at Eddie. Maybe now Eddie's going to be like, that may be beneath me, but like hoping an 18-year-old tears his ACL, that he's okay with. But
Well, that was
he's like, that's kind of dirty.
That was kind of a joke.
That's beneath me.
There's only one person that I truly hope injures himself and never plays again, and that's Kevin Durant. So when I say that about Jacob Phillips, he's a good kid. I really don't mean that.
The thing that worries me, that keeps me up at night at times, is that Eddie has control of the camera completely. Like, I don't know if there's stalking video of Kaylee Hartung on,
No.
if there was some of that involved in your footage from the Sugar Bowl.
The only reason there isn't is because I've thought about that before, and I'm like, what am I going to do if somebody like comes up and is like, I need to see all your footage from the game? That'd be like the most embarrassing thing of all time. So I'd take it on my phone if I was going to do that.
Well, after the
She's
Iowa
going to
State
block me on Twitter now.
after the Iowa State incident, we got to keep you under wraps.
Hey, I went back this year. There was no problems in Ames. Everything was good.
Well, it's configured different now, isn't it? Is there more room?
No, it's still the same because they still have like the cheerleaders down in the. They're like the only school that has like their pom squad is like
They're in the end zone and they never move.
and they have like two teams of them.
Yeah.
It's like 25 girls on each side. So it's not a bad place to stand, but it's a lot tougher to do the job.
It seems like they've made an upgrade in their palms from what I saw this year. I might have stared a little too hard at a couple.
I don't remember. I'd say TCU's one. My power rankings.
I'm too old for this. It's too
TCU
creepy.
1, OSU 2. I'm almost too old for this. And I'd say probably Texas 3.
See, this is my home row. I'll never be too old for this. I'm good.
What about
I'm
OSU?
fine.
They were always near the top in my time.
I'd say it's up there. Top 4, I guess. Top 3, maybe pushing top 3.
It's always been concerning to me that OU is never anywhere near the top, even in my heyday.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. Yeah.
And
I
that's
had a lot of
always
friends
weird
that were on the
because
pom team.
you guys have been around a lot of campuses. I have too. Like Oklahoma's got a lot of beautiful women on their campus, but it never seems to translate to the pom squad.
I do believe that generates from them being like competitive and they actually care about competitions back in the day. That's what the rumor was back in my day.
It's an excuse.
That's what I always heard, but that easily could be an excuse.
Boosters kids is what I think is the problem.
I'm still super fond of Missouri. That's a strong
Missouri,
group.
Oregon.
Back in my day, once again, not being creepy now. Back in my day, they were as strong as you could possibly be.
We need to call Yarmond in, see if they're still
What do
strong.
they call them? The Golden Girls?
Yep.
Something like
And
that.
I swear to God, they're all blonde. Like I don't know why.
Missouri's a good producer.
I remember in
they got a good-
2007 at San Antonio at the Alamo Dome, they came walking out of like the tunnel, and I was going in, and I literally probably looked like the biggest perv on the planet. I was just like, my jaw dropped, hit the floor, and could not believe that there were that many just beautiful women all together at once.
Why is this mirror on your shoe?
No, that did not happen. That was just pre Scoop H. No, we had Scoop HD then.
No,
It was
not
Scoop,
at the.
It was Scoop standard definition.
I don't think I was there at that.
You weren't there.
Oh, okay.
It was pre Eddie Scoop HD.
It probably was shit then.
It really was.
I think I was at that game though. Was that at the Alamo Dome?
Sam,
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
Sam's freshman year.
Okay.
You were a Fiji, probably living it up.
100% blackout.
You probably blacked out on the
1,000
Riverwalk.
1,000%.
That was the Mike DeArmond game
Oh, I've heard legends of
okay.
that.
when he ripped on Sooner fans, and then he gave it up to them after they won.
That rivalry was heated for.
See,
a
that
couple
was
years.
that was the beginning of like vlogging, the video log. when you'd go up in your room and your phone video was just good enough to where I don't even know if you could use phone. I don't know if people were using phones then or using probably like
webcams.
Yeah,
like pre-Twitter almost. Wasn't
yeah,
it
was. Well, 2006 is when Twitter started, but nobody was using it then. So, I think that's creepy enough. The cheerleader rankings.
Do you think there's a podcast out there where girls are talking about our looks?
No.
Yeah, I don't think that's happening.
The ranking the Oklahoma media.
It would be a short list.
I was about to say, I don't know how you make a distinction.
It's basically
we all kind of blend in.
If you're not married, you're not on the list because nobody wants to marry you.
Fair.
Who's married? I couldn't. Who's married on the? We all kind of look the same to me.
Well, the beat is completely different now because it's changed so much. It's like Kersey went to Arkansas. So you have Ryan Aber married. Jake Trotter's not really on the beat. He's just a Big 12 guy. He's married. See, Garen's not on the beat anymore. He's a columnist.
Jake doesn't look like a troll like the rest of us.
No, he comes from money.
Yeah, he's from Cassidy.
He went to Cassidy. And he went to some college, like that had like an enrollment of like 5.
I can't ever remember the name of it.
I bet there were so many. Like, I just saw that article in I think it was USA Today or something about some guys that were from Birmingham. They stopped a fire on spring break trip, and one of their names was like Ford Hamilton or something.
Chandler.
Yeah, it is like the most southern name. I bet there was a bunch of those guys up at Jake's college.
I'm sure their collars were popped, wearing a lot of neon.
They might have been, yeah.
All right, so spring football has started. The three of us have had a chance to go, and I'm sure Josh has seen plenty of video that Eddie has put out there. Amazed that the weight of one Marquise Brown became such a big deal because I actually looked at the Rivals 100 receiver list from last year. There were a lot of guys that were like, and Marquise Brown I think was listed at 170 in our database coming out of high school. But there were legitimate guys on the Rivals 100, like top 25 that were like 160, 5'11", 160. That wasn't uncommon to see that weight and height. Of course, this guy's a JUCO.
I think just seeing 148 really freaked out a lot of people. I mean, even if it would have been like 152, I think that would have been a lot better than actually seeing the number of 148. And
it was just bizarre how so many numbers were off. Like, I know that Ricky Berry's not 244 pounds anymore. And Devontae Lampkin, I was like, what? Like, when he got fat all of a sudden? Because he would have had to get fat in like a month. Because he was putting videos out of himself training and said he was, 360 or something like that?
Yeah, I think 363 was the exact number. It was also weird, too, though, because I tweeted out like most of the freshman enrollees' heights and weights, and Grant Calcaterra immediately tweeted me back and was like, nuh-uh, 233. It was like a source of pride almost.
Like
and
he
then,
went up?
Yeah, 13 pounds. And then who else? Justin Broyles immediately DM'd me 175, not 170. And I was like, I got you, Justin. So I don't think that those were exactly correct. And, I think that Mike Houck came out and said that Marquise Brown ended up at
157 or
157, he said, which is a 9-pound difference. But I don't know. I asked Lincoln Riley about
looking at him, I didn't watch him. I kind of thought like, oh, it kind of reminds me of Julius McMillan a little bit. It's an old name for you. But, I mean, a guy that wasn't like rail thin. I mean, he was developed.
The number was more jarring than what he actually looked like.
Yeah,
I mean, he looked
If you watched him out on a football field, you wouldn't look at him and say, "Oh, that kid's too small. He's never going to make it."
I mean, Jalen Saunders, D.D. Westbrook, Mark Clayton. Oh, do we have a Laney side?
Oh,
yes.
Laney.
You hear a little Laney in here. She just rolled in.
What's
You want
Laney
to say
up
hi?
to?
Come here. No, not going to say hi. Not interested.
Even Eddie's got a smile on his face.
I'm a good person.
Except when you get around a microphone, you're kind of like me.
No, I just tell people what they want to hear.
No, you don't. You don't tell Rutger fans what they want to hear. You don't tell Skip Bayless what he wants to hear.
Skip Bayless doesn't read his Twitter. He probably doesn't even know. I know for a fact he doesn't know who I am. But still, screw him. We'll fight you.
You did say that. You said you will fight him.
Skip Bayless.
Yeah.
Skip Bayless works out a lot.
I will knock
He
him
would
out.
kill
I would
you.
knock him out.
He would kill you.
I would stab him. He wouldn't have a chance.
Street rules.
And Rutgers people, what are they going to do? They're from New Jersey.
Okay, so back to spring football before Eddie hijacks everything with his anger. Here's the thing. We had this talk about the defense and all this stuff, and we were talking about Calvin Thibodeau earlier, and really kind of what I've been able to piece together, and what people I've talked to about defense, they can say four-man front all they want. It's essentially the same defense and alignments they had last year, but they're going to change the way that they play gaps. And they're not going to be... The guys in the middle are going to actually have a chance to make some plays instead of just being responsible to clog things up. And that's kind of how it's been explained to me. Now, you're going to have... Obo is still going to be a guy that stands up on the end and he can move around. And then you're going to have DJ Ward or whoever on the other side. But I don't think you're going to see Obo. You're not going to see like Obo as one defensive end and Caleb Kelly as the other defense. That's not the defense that they're going to employ.
How much of that do you think is having Neville Gallimore and Marquise Overton and Matt Romar and Devontae Lampkin and just feeling like, man, we have on the defensive line our assets, our edges in the interior. We got to get those guys in the backfield making plays. We can't just have them eating up blocks so DJ Ward can go make a play. How much of that's personnel driven, do you think?
I think a lot of it, and I think they know that Gallimore can do a lot more than that they've had him doing. They think Devontae Lampkin can do more than what they've had him doing. I think Overton and Romar really are kind of middle guys, and they're going to be limited at that. But they want to do. And I don't know the whole particulars, but what it was described to me is like the defense they were running last year did not allow the guys on the edges to make plays and get upfield. And it's going to change this year that those guys are going to be put in situations where they're not going to be in a constricted area, that they're going to be able to get upfield, that the way they're going to play gaps is going to allow the guys on the edges to make more plays. And basically, I was, like last year, and somebody told me, like, look at the tackles for loss and sacks last year from the interior guys. Like, there were none of those. And it wasn't just because they didn't have guys that could, rush the quarterback, but they played in a way that did not allow anyone to make tackles for losses on the interior. And that they're going to change the scheme and the way that they, approach the gaps responsibilities in a way that lets those guys make plays.
It almost seems like after the season was over and, there was so much focus put on that Texas Tech game, it almost seems like if you were to ask Mike Stoops, and I guess we'll have a chance tonight on Thursday at post-practice, but the 23 sacks, I think, almost bothers him more than giving up the 1,000 passing yards or whatever they gave up again in Lubbock. Would that be fair to say?
Mike hates the fact that he wants his secondary to look good, because that's what he is. He's a secondary guy. And when you're not getting pressure on a quarterback, you're putting a lot more. And I'm sure he hates the fact that, people criticize him all the time for playing off the ball. He plays off the ball because they can't get pressure.
Right.
If they could get pressure and they knew within 3-4 seconds the quarterback was going to be under duress, I think he'd play press coverage every play of the game.
Yeah. It just seems like, I mean, when you think back to that Tech game especially, it was Mahomes kind of dipping out to his right.
Mahomes missed a bunch of deep throws in that game, too.
I mean, he could have thrown for 1,000.
And in that game, Mahomes was beating him deep. And in those Baylor games where they had kind of gotten embarrassed in the past, a lot of that was actually more horizontal stuff where they were playing way off. And Baylor just said, okay, we'll take our curls, we'll take our underneath stuff. And they just picked Oklahoma apart.
Right, yeah.
Mahomes was more, people were getting deep, people were getting by everybody. There's a distinction there. In the Big 12, it's usually the Baylor thing. It's usually quarterbacks get the ball in their hands so quickly that there's no chance to get pressure on the quarterback. But when someone like Mahomes has all the time he had and had guys running deep like he had, you had to get more pressure than you did in that game. You just had to, and they didn't.
I think the biggest thing defensively is figuring out how they're going to keep Caleb Kelly on the field when they feel like they need to have more DBs on the field. To me, that's the key to everything. And does that mean eventually that you're replacing DJ Ward with Caleb Kelly? It might mean that.
That's a talent upgrade. You take that.
It'll be interesting.
But let's face it, Caleb Kelly is special because he's physical,
Yeah.
not because he rushes the passer.
He really found himself those last, 3 games of the season? 2 regular season and 1 Sugar
Yeah.
Bowl. I mean,
In fact, I think Caleb Kelly might be the best middle linebacker that they have.
It's tough not to say that he isn't, just because, I mean, you're going to take him over either the Looney Tunes, and then you just don't. There's so much unknown with John Michael Terry. And Josh, I know that you're really, really high on him, and he looked extremely good physically, I thought, on Tuesday when we were able to go out to practice.
Oh, I'm a big fan, but I don't know how you'd argue that Caleb Kelly shouldn't be your starter at any position, any of your linebacker spots.
He's one of your best 11 players for sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
He needs to be on the field every play.
You know, a guy that I thought that looked really good physically, and I didn't even realize it was him until I looked up at the roster, I thought Mark Jackson looked pretty good on Tuesday.
Yeah.
And
He's just been so raw. I mean,
yeah.
and he didn't look as raw when the little bit I was able to watch him.
Yeah, and I mean, I say that he looked good. We watched him for 20 minutes stretch and run around a ring one time. So it's not like I saw the kid out there making 15 tackles during our practice or anything like that. I think that should be noted as well. But physically, I thought he looked really good.
Josh, do you think this move for Jackson helps him, his style of play, maybe getting to put his hand in the dirt a little more?
I think it does. I think he is. I mean, people forget he's a guy that played almost unanimously with his hand in the ground for Cibolo Steel. So, I mean, that's where he really feels comfortable. That's his home base. And I think the standing up was just a lot for him to process. And, I know people are like, well, the roles are essentially the same, and they are. But it's just a different way of attacking his shoulder. I mean, like you're just little differences in how you're going to step, little differences in how you're reacting to what the offensive lineman's doing. So there's just little changes that are going to be involved, and I think that probably was a lot for him because, like Harry said, he came in last year, was kind of raw to begin with, and then kind of having to learn an entirely new role. That's going to change some things. So, I mean, I think Mark Jackson's going to be a good player before it's all said and done. And, he's kind of one of my examples of, and I think it lends into what Kerry's saying, where it looks like they're going to go more one gap, where you've got good guys, you've got a lot of talent at that second level. You've got to find a way to get it all on the field. So the idea of saying, well, we're going to cut down and we're going to go with one less linebacker didn't make any sense. But if the 4-man front's just kind of a way of saying we're going to play one gap, then you can make that work with a lot of different guys.
I'll tell you, here's some of my impressions of what I saw from the linebackers. First off, walking in to practice, I ran into Stephen Parker and Obo, and Obo just looks magnificent. I mean, he looks unbelievable. You look at him now, and he's chiseled. And I've never really thought of him in that way before, but he looks outstanding. I'll say this. The guy that surprised me and how good he looked was Kenneth Murray. I mean, long arms. I mean, nice size. I mean, he's up to I've got him at 232. I mean, he's a guy that really impressed me just physically. And then, as we said, Ricky DeBerry slimmed down. Curtis Bolton has put on some weight, I think, from what I saw. He's not a whole lot different, but little thicker in the arms. He kind of looked like he had a basketball body last year, and now he's looking like he's kind of become more of a football guy.
You say basketball body. I kind of thought, and I don't know if this is a knock on him, but I didn't realize that Addison Gumbs was so tall. Like, I thought he was extremely...
He's tall and he's skinny.
Yeah.
I mean, and Levi Draper looked small and skinny. He looked almost... I'm trying to think of the right word. Not unimpressive, but just... He looked like a guy. Like Pat Jones has said, he's just a guy.
Yeah. And it's fun to see these guys when we do now in March at the in the middle end of March, and then see them in 2.5 months when they've gone through the summer plan, or I guess 3 months when they've gone through the summer plan, and you can actually kind of get before and after, I guess, if you will, of it's like, holy shit, that guy really blew up this summer. I remember there was a couple guys last year that were like that.
I mean, the holy shit award goes to Rodney Anderson.
Yeah, I mean, he lifts. We'll leave it at that.
He hadn't had anything else to do for last year.
I thought the tweet that you put out, Kerry, from the Scoop account hit it dead on. I mean, you went from a guy that looked like Samaje Perine, who I don't think anybody thought you could get bigger than Samaje. I'm not saying Rodney's bigger than Samaje.
He's more cut.
But he's definitely more cut, and he carries it really, really well.
All those running backs were pretty jacked.
Yeah, I mean
Sutton looked big.
I thought Trey Sermon
looked huge. They have a big athletic backfield still. And that's something Lincoln Riley talked about after practice, too. He said, everybody wants to just, okay, who's going to be Joe Mixon? Who's going to be Samaje Perine? He says, look, I look at my personnel every year is different. And he says, I love the guys I have in the backfield. I love that the variety of talent I have with Sermon and Sutton and Adams and Anderson and Flowers. He says, I love all the things I can do with those guys. So I think it might be a year where you see just everybody kind of starting to find a role out of that backfield. Everybody kind of pitching in and finding their niche. I think that you may not see anybody. I mean, I know you won't see anybody as good as Samaje Perine or Joe Mixon, but I think you could see them make up for it in the aggregate. Maybe I think that production could be made up with the guys they have on campus.
I think one of the things that really stood out to me, just talking to people, is we tried it with Bob. I tried it with Baker. I don't know if Lincoln was asked about it, but the 11 new enrollees that they've got. I think everybody asked who stood out to you, and nobody's really kind of put their foot out there and said, "Oh, this guy is a cut above." It's like I know they don't want to make anybody feel bad, but if somebody usually is just like blowing them away, they'll usually say it. I mean, we got the generic. They're all good and they're all impressive, and we like them all. But usually, if somebody comes in and just wows them, they're not afraid to say it, and they didn't single anybody out. Nobody would single anybody out.
I'm just trying to go through the list of guys.
Maybe Marquise Brown a little bit, maybe a little bit. They kind of hinted at his speed.
Yeah, they talked a lot about his speed.
Well, and they've talked about Marcellus Sutton back on the signing day.
That's true. Jeffrey Mead told me that Chris Robinson throws it harder than any other quarterback there. I mean, that's something.
It would. I thought that maybe there was a little bit with Calcaterra. I thought it was really funny that he literally followed Mark Andrews around, and I put it up in the board in Joe's post-practice thing.
That was kind of strange.
That's kind of funny. I mean, I talked to Mark Andrews a little bit about just their relationship. He said they're buddies and everything like that. But I do think that there's a little bit of that comparison. He's a little bit shorter than Mark is right now. Yeah. But you can tell, I mean, the kid's extremely athletic, and that was just watching him go run some routes, 3 or 4 routes. So
the thing that's funny is like the guy, and it's without fail, and it makes sense, but the guys that are the most impressive, other than like Rodney Anderson, I mean, you have the freaks, but like you look at Dimitri Flowers, you look at Obo, you look at a guy like Mark Andrews. I mean, those guys, Orlando Brown, it's like there is this cut above everyone else, and it's the older guys, but it's like you look at them and that's why Oklahoma football has won 2 straight Big 12 championships. They have some guys that are just like men, without a question, just men. Like they're not high school prospects anymore. They've made the transition into just being grown-ass men.
When you brought up Obo, that's exactly what I thought. When I saw him on Tuesday, I thought, that's an NFL player. I don't know if I ever saw that before, but I saw him on Tuesday, and I thought, that's an NFL-looking player. And there's a huge difference between that and, the new guys on campus. And I think back, a wide receiver, Kenny Stills, when he came over in the spring, the pictures that surfaced to him when he first tried on campus, he had...
he was tiny.
I don't think I ever saw a guy that thin playing football. And by the time he finished, I think by the time his freshman year rolled around, he at least looked like he filled out and was a normal receiver out there. So I think it will be interesting to see how these bodies change from
like
now.
Drew Samia is a man.
Drew Samia, that whole offensive line's pretty big. I mean, Creed Humphrey looked pretty big. Orlando Brown's huge. Bobby Evans a big guy.
It was interesting hearing Lincoln Riley talk about the offensive line situation. I asked him if this was going to be the best offensive line he's ever had, and he said, they expect him to. And, he went on to say that he'd be surprised if they roll out the same starting 5 as they did at the end of the season. And, I don't know what you want to draw out of that, but I think the bottom line is that they're extremely talented and they're extremely deep at probably just about every position.
Well, and I mean, they don't even have Cody Ford in their starting lineup. And I mean, he's going to work his way back. And I'm sure he's still got a little bit of shape to get. I mean, he's almost 370 pounds.
When he comes back, you have him, Ben Powers, Drew Samia, and Alex Dalton all capable of playing guard and playing guard at a high level.
And Jonathan Alvarez, too.
Has Oklahoma had an offensive line this deep under Stoops? I don't think they have.
No, they haven't.
In every other year they've had a deep offensive line. That's been the years they've made.
And when they've had
runs.
The thing is, like, when they've had, this was kind of their history. Like, they've had, the Jamal Browns and the Wes Sims, the Phil Lodeholtz, the Duke Robinsons, but they've always had like one guy on that line, whether it was Brandon Walker, that was a little bit undersized, or John Cooper, as a center. They've always kind of had that runt in there on the. There are no runts. I mean, Eric Wren could probably qualify a little bit as a runt, but if Creed Humphrey ends up being a guy that gets time at center, even if they put Jonathan Alvarez, there's no runts on that. I've never seen an offensive line like that at Oklahoma.
No, all you can do is give it up to Bill Beatembo for what he's brought in. He's brought in some really, really strong beef in the offensive line.
Like you said, we're going to talk to defense today for the first time. It'll be a chance to kind of, and we're going to write about this in some of the stories that we're working on. But Stephen Parker being out really gives a big opportunity for a guy like Khalil Houghton. Will Sunderland's going to have Ahmad Thomas being gone. Will Sunderland's going to have an opportunity to win that job. I mean, there are a lot of young guys in the secondary at the safety position, whether it's nickel, free, whatever, that are going to have an opportunity to really grow and make a case for starting jobs. And I think Will Sunderland's probably the most intriguing because we've seen him make plays.
Yeah, I talked to you about this earlier, Kerry. That safety position to me is really interesting, especially when you consider a few years ago when they landed that class of Will Sunderland, Khalil Houghton, and Prentice McKinney. Those are 3 4-star safeties. People were really excited, and for good reason, about the talent there. And this is the first time they've had that chance. This is the first time they've had an opening, really, to come in and fill a spot with Stephen Parker and Ahmad Thomas ahead of him. And now Stephen Parker's going to be injured and Ahmad Thomas has graduated. The opportunity's there for somebody to make a name, somebody to make a play in the spring game or in scrimmages to really stand out. And I mean, it could be someone like Chance Sylvie even who came in last year. But I think that safety, it really is the spot on the defense where you can be interested and see who's going to emerge, like you are kind of worried about running back and wide receiver on the offense. Because Will Sunderland could be a playmaker back there. And I think Oklahoma has been looking for a playmaker at safety for a few years now. And I think that's in Sunderland's DNA. If he can figure it out enough to where they trust him back there. I think it's in Houghton's DNA too, but he didn't show it on the field. Houghton looked much different on the field in college than he did in high school because that it just hasn't seemed to click. I don't know what it is, but I guess safeties, they have to have an ability to trust everything they see, and I haven't seen that from Houghton yet. At least Sunderland does that. At least he plays fast.
One other thing that really kind of, made me reevaluate kind of what I've said about receivers watching that is we kind of forget that Nick Basquin is a really good receiver. Like, he could become one of the top 2 receivers on this team.
I had him in my preseason depth chart.
Okay.
That's just,
That was a group thing, which you guys know I don't participate in group stuff.
No, I think that Nick Basquin, he was a guy that before the season last year, I pretty much laughed at the idea of him actually getting meaningful PT, and he really had a nice year. I think outside of, I guess if you caught more than 10 balls, I guess on this team last year, you had a nice year. I mean, Dede was just so important to everything that they did. It seemed like that if you could just get 3 or 4 receptions from another guy in a game, you were usually pretty good. But he's going to need to take another step this year, I would think, if they want to have a good offense again, I guess.
Jeff Mead brought him up. He singled him out as somebody that he thought could be a really good possession receiver for this team, that you could trust where he was going to be, that he was going to run the right route with the right timing, and he'd have sure hands. So I think that he's someone, while he didn't get on the field a lot last year, when he was on the field, he did what he needed to do. He caught the balls that were thrown his way. He made big plays. He had that long touchdown. I can't remember what game that was now, but he did what he needed to do. And so, although I think that inside kind of receiver position that's not a tight end is going to be interesting to see what happens, because we also heard good things about Michael Jones, and maybe he's somebody that plays more of a kind of a slot inside role, and he's someone that's almost been the forgotten guy from last year being the new hot receiver. What's he going to bring to this year? Now people have kind of moved on to Lamb and Rambo, but Michael Jones is still there. Michael Jones could be somebody that factors into this offense before it's all said and done.
Yeah, and I asked Bob about him on his press conference day. I'll say this. Here's kind of my hot take. They come out of the spring, and you're hearing really positive things about Michael Jones and Nick Basquin. I think this receiving core is going to be fine. And you add one more guy like a Zach Farrar or somebody like that kind of comes out of the blue. Like I hate to say it, I'm giving up on Jordan Smallwood being a great receiver. Kind of giving up on A.D. Miller. Jeffrey Mead, I think he can be good, not great. Dahu Green, you guys are bigger fans than I am, but I'm not giving up on him. I think as long as you got Nick Basquin, Michael Jones, if those two are coming out playing well, you add them to Marquise and you add them to Mark Andrews, I think you're pretty good at receiver.
I think Mark Andrews.
And then see what happens with CeeDee Lamb and Charleston Rambo.
If Mark Andrews is healthy or stays healthy all year, I think he's going to have a phenomenal year.
Yeah, I asked him how he felt, and he said he felt 100%, and that he really didn't feel that way most of last year until, I guess, the Sugar Bowl, since he got some rest before then. And I asked him what his personal goals were for this year, and he seemed like someone who had big expectations for himself. I think Mark thinks this is going to be a year that really sets himself up to put up a lot of big numbers. He feels healthy. There's a lot of yards to be filled in from last year, and he did set the freshman receiving touchdown record at OU. So I think he's someone that really feels that he could have a big year in the system. Now, the thing about I worry with Mark is he's got the body. I think he's got the speed. I don't know if he has. I worry about his agility and his wiggle. I guess you could say I'm not sure if he has the explosiveness to really separate himself from guys the way he needs to. What do you guys think about that?
I don't. Who are you talking about? I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Mark Andrews.
I should have singled somebody. I was just floating out. Mark Andrews. Does he?
No, I mean he doesn't have great separation. I don't think he'll ever be that guy.
I don't think you're asking him to do that.
But
though.
he's a guy that it's like that play he had. He has these plays in the end zone. I think he had one at Tech. He had one against Auburn. Like you throw the ball in his area, he's great at like posting up.
Yeah.
And shielding you from getting to the football. He's so big and strong. But no, I mean, his biggest plays, there's a reason all his big pass plays come on bust by a secondary. Like, he's usually running wide open down the middle of the field because somebody has had a bust. And Lincoln Riley's great at drawing that stuff up, but that's his value to you. He's not a guy that's going to be a third down possession receiver. You can just count on him getting separation, sticking his foot in the ground, and being 3 yards further downfield than the other guy.
Who is that guy for Oklahoma this year? I think that's a good question. Who's the reliable guy? Baker, 3rd and 5. Who's Baker looking at?
Basquin.
I don't know. We got to find that out.
I think that's Basquin's role.
Yeah,
I agree.
It really is. He's your third down
best.
specialist. Yeah, you're right.
Because you think about Andrews, like forget the route run, forget that. Like, do you really trust Mark Andrews' hands so far in his career to make that key third down catch?
No, they're not great. Not at all. They're not. We gotta have to run here. We're running out of time. I want to hit on one other thing. It was kind of awkward going out there and watching the DBs, and I did for a little bit, and got some, Justin Broyles found the Sooner Scoop camera, of course, and as Josh noted, and pointed right at us for a nice picture. But it was really strange seeing PJ and Banasaur out there running around. Like, oh, he's still here. Like, that guy has got to be... I'm surprised that he's still here.
I feel like he's the guy at the bar that's heard last call 4 times and he just won't leave.
What's crazy about him is he might have a Stan Von Taylor career then, where really early in both of their careers, they were on the field. They were looked to play and be, guys in this program, and then it didn't work out. It didn't follow through, but it looks like PJ's going to hang around the same way Stan Von did.
Stan Von Taylor, he's given more to the program than PJ and Banasaur.
Special teams.
Yeah, he has.
Gunner.
He has. He actually started a game in his career. Well, I guess PJ did too.
I think for Stan Von, like, he was always a kid that his degree was as important to him as playing football. With PJ wanted to be a star. Like, PJ was talking about going to the NFL and doing all that kind of stuff. Like, that's why this whole thing surprises me. Like, I'm surprised that he would stay in a situation that, from everything I've gathered, and I'm sure you guys have heard the same, I don't think he's unaware that it is a mountain he'll probably never climb.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think if Mike Stoops is around, you kind of know where you stand if you haven't played.
Exactly.
Like, so it's like you wonder if the kid is just kind of ignoring the obvious. But I'll say this, I mean, you watch Jordan Parker out there, you watch Jordan Thomas, and right behind those guys, you notice Parnell Motley. I mean, I think he's going to be a real key to this team at some point this season, whether it's an injury or something. They're going to have to rely on him, and I think he could end up being one of your most valuable pieces on the defense.
And they liked him a lot last year. He's somebody whose name came up in regards to PJ and Banasaur. He saw the writing on the wall last year when Parnell Motley came in and was building this buzz, and I think he's already passed. That he's going to be passed by more guys in this next class. And I think if Oklahoma they start the year on defense, they're going to want to have Jordan Thomas and Jordan Parker, and they're going to hope that that's it. I don't know how much deeper you can go besides Parnell Motley. Can they trust Antoine Stevens? We know they can't really trust PJ and Banasaur, so they better hope Parnell Motley's the guy if they have to go deep into the bench at all.
They could go to Will Johnson if they really had to, because he's done some decent things at corner as a backup. He's just one of those guys. I think they got lulled into this thing where Will Johnson, he was nice in spurts. They decided to make him a central figure of their defense, and he's not a star player. He's a six man. I think he's not a starter.
Bob Stoops had a good answer for him. It was somebody asked him, can Will Johnson fill that role? And the response was, well, we've seen him do good things in the past, so maybe he can do that in the future. That's kind of how.
Don't ask him to be a linebacker against Ohio State again.
I think they appreciate what he's done for them in the nickel in the past, but they saw his limitations against the Buckeyes, and I think that they're fully aware of that now. And it's something that I thought Josh did a great job pointing out after that game of that just was never going to work, and it's always going to be, like I said, one of the limitations of having Will Johnson in there at that size. He can't be that physical, and you saw how much better the defense became once Caleb Kelly was your guy down there around the box, or Steven Parker. It's just there's no comparison.
All right, well, that's going to do it. We've got to get out of here. I got to give us a chance to get this uploaded before practice starts. We're going to talk to defense today. Scrimmage coming up this weekend. I do believe I'll be able to get you some info on what goes. Of course, the first scrimmage is kind of a slow one. It's interesting because they're going to have the spring game on the 8th, but then they're also going to be practicing the week after that, and we're going to have media after the spring game, so there'll be kind of a wrap-up. So they're just getting started. Practice number 2 today. They'll have a little kind of a mini scrimmage, I think, over the weekend. We won't have any media until next week. But, as always, the world-famous closed scrimmage reports.
I can't wait to see somebody
will be out there.
Can't wait to see somebody report that, player A had a really good scrimmage, and then
Chris Robinson is definitely the starting quarterback now.
Yeah, for the next month, it's, he had a really good scrimmage in April. I think he's going to be a Heisman.
Nobody saw.
He's going to be a Heisman winner. Guess what? You're wrong.
And that guy will never play. is usually how that works.
I love the spring award. We need to give a yearly spring award to the player that makes the most noise.
Scrimmage star of the year.
Makes the most noise, but will never play it down in Oklahoma.
And my other favorite thing is when I give a closed scrimmage report, which you're lucky to have in the first place. But my other favorite thing is when people argue with me about the details of the closed scrimmage report when they weren't at the scrimmage either. But then their source told them, no, it was a 65-yard touchdown, not a 60.
Yeah, that goes back to the type of people that want to bitch about a kid playing or taking visits. Same mentality, really.
I think it's worse.
You just don't get it.
I can sort of understand being upset about a kid taking a visit. But when you want to argue about something that neither one of us saw with our own eyes, I'd like to murder you.
Well, and it's always the
Makes the world go
triviality
round.
of it. Like, was it a 57-yard touchdown or a 62-yard? Who gives a crap? Like, that doesn't make any difference to the narrative of the story.
I heard PJ and Bonasaur blew the coverage. No, it was Antoine Stevens, you idiot.
And 5 different people can see 5 completely different things. So you're always going to deal with that filter. Like, this is what this guy saw. Well, I heard somebody else saw something. I assume they did too. That's just kind of, you're watching 22 guys in one snap collide into each other. People are going to see different things,
All right, well, that's going to do it. Enough with the bitching. It's great to be back and actually be covering some football. By the way, John Shin is helping us out during spring practice, and great to have him on board writing stories. And no, I'm not asking him to deal with you guys on the message boards because I don't want him to run screaming. I want him to keep writing stories for now. So, for Josh McQuistion, and Lainey McQuistion, who was a special guest on the show today. Thanks, Josh, for joining us.
Absolutely. I tried to bring her in here so she would do it, but I'll have to do the send-off instead.
We'll have to. Oh, you did? You tried to get her to say bye?
I tried to get her in here. She is a little afraid of me and the headphones and the microphone. I think it's a little much for her.
You're going to have to get her used to it because we need to get her on one of these days. All right, for Eddie Radosevich, for Joe DuVall, thanks, guys, for jumping in the studio with me. I'm Kerry Murdoch, and we'll see you guys next time right back here on the Unofficial 40.